away.
Wow.
I know.
How are you?
I sit next to you.
Absolutely.
Okay, Chelsea.
Okay, well, we don't like to turn our heads.
I was called you Saturday night. The Arts League had a casino night at the
I want to welcome
in Champlain,
everybody and
the States.
say hello to you on a Tuesday night, which is not normal. I'm glad that you got the message that it was a little bit different. Welcome everybody, and I have some guests that we don't normally see here, and we're glad to have you. She isn't here tonight, but one of the things I would really like to do, Joanne Stewart took care of our newsletter from its inception. What was that, John? It had to be
Wow.
of about 2005 and so forth. And she finally said, when she clicked over to that 90, she said it was time to quit. So that, Sarah has taken that over. But I want to thank Joanne for all of her efforts and for keeping us in line and keeping people informed. Okay. And one of the things that WeCan does quite often is get together and try to get people together when there is an issue for the West District that we can talk about. We just had a victory in a zoning case on Division Street.
Oh, let's hear about it.
We didn't have to speak, we were there to talk, but they saw the old word handwriting on the wall and they withdrew the case. And because of, I guess, state financing, it's dead for now. And so that.
Well, you filled the city council chambers with blue shirts. You outnumbered us red shirts who were there in support of a senior development.
A different project.
That's right.
altogether, yes. And it passed, by the way.
That's right, unanimously. It had to pass unanimous, yeah.
But
So what were you there for, Glenn?
this was a fairly high density with kids development on Division Street. I've forgotten the address, but it's just up the hill from where the old Chico Locus was, local Chico.
3401 division.
3401 Division. That's just as you start up the hill from Village Creek. It was an old junkyard before, and they wanted to put 75 units in there with, for people, and it would have kids and so forth. The trouble is, it was the wrong project in the wrong place. There was no room for, there's no sidewalks for kids to go to school. The school district objected to it. We had not yet seen a drainage plan for the city, so they didn't know how that would work. So we just said it's just wrong.
So now they're gonna put another car park in there.
I don't know what they're
Used
putting
cars,
in there.
right?
The property is still for
You
sale.
need that.
Yeah.
And what was approved?
It was it's 7.5 something acres, and they wanted to put 75 units on it.
Affordable housing.
Apartments.
Sorry.
Affordable housing.
But that's
That's the-
affordable
That's
housing.
the buzzword.
Oh, yeah, not in my backyard.
Well, there's no sidewalks.
Well, that same developer, they opened, on June 21st, they opened a senior apartment at 7851 South Collins.
Yes, yeah, way
And it's
south.
beautiful.
Yes. It was just the wrong.
That's
I
right, wrong
contention, It was the
location.
wrong location.
Yes.
Some seniors.
Well, you had something you'd like to.
Well, I just wanted to tell everyone that I'm offering a free educational seminar called Medicare Traps to Avoid. And I'm offering it at 2 different locations on 2 different dates. And I put flyers back here on the back table if anyone's interested. The first one will be at Skillet and Grill, which I didn't know about Skillet and Grill until about 10 weeks ago. I'd never heard of it. And people would say, "What? You don't know about Skillet and Grill?"
Just on Division Street?
Yeah.
Yes.
When is it?
October the 4th, that's a Friday afternoon, and then I'm giving it at the Woodland West Library on Saturday, November the 2nd.
Okay, and there's a flyer back there that give you the information on that.
Right.
We have our code compliance people here tonight. Kelly Marvel, who we haven't seen in a while.
Yes.
It's been with Gabriel Sanchez here almost every time. He couldn't be here tonight. So do you want to talk about code with us?
Sure. First of all, my name is Robert Gresham. I'm Westside Code Compliance Officer, and I want to remind everybody that we do have on October 1st, we've got National Night Out coming up. So please spread the word. It's an opportunity for everyone to get together and mingle with each other. You'll also have fire and PD there, and code compliance will be there. So opportunity to ask some questions, get some questions answered, or just, spend some time and getting to know your neighbor. But, and any questions you have?
What are your code issues right now, other than high weeds? Of course, it's been dry, so they're not very high.
Well, this is our busy time of year, so it's not really anything that we don't have an issue with right now, but we tend to get a lot of calls for high weeds and grass, unclean premise, and nuisance outside storage right around this time. And typically at the beginning of the year, you'll get a lot more calls for overhanging tree limbs because they cut them back, or they just survived last year, now spring's come back, and now they're going over into the yard, so we'll get quite a bit of those calls.
Any questions about code compliance?
If you call in to code enforcement, and does the person that you're making the complaint to know that it came from somebody? That like, or is that
They'll know that
anonymous,
someone
or
called
how does that
in.
work?
They'll know that someone called in, but they won't know who called in. And if I have your information or we have your information, we're not allowed to release that. They can go through a legal process, or they can do an open records request, and but that information typically gets redacted, so they're not going to get that information. So that not anything I would necessarily worry about.
What's your Ask working?
How's what?
Software, the app.
The app.
Amanda?
Ask our-
Ask on, to my knowledge, is working fine.
I think there are still a few issues of, it's not picking up the address sometimes.
That's what I'm
Yeah.
telling you.
And
It doesn't pick
we
up
do
the
have,
address, even if you put it in.
right, it's not catching that, where that star goes, it's not catching that right address. We do have someone that looks at this report every day, and if it doesn't pick up 123 Jones Street, it will just, he researches it, he forwards it to, let's say, Robert. I don't have an exact address or the correct address, please go and investigate. So, that's done on a daily basis, I believe,
It
to
is.
try to, get these addresses that are out there in Wonderland that don't come straight to the individual inspector taken care of.
But you can look at it, you know the address, it doesn't appear on the app.
A lot of times they'll say like at the corner of Green Oaks and West Webster Way, there's not really an address given, so, he can look and try to pinpoint what you're talking about. If not, the officer is sent out there to investigate what address and is the violation taking place at. I think it's gotten a lot better.
It does. Yes, sir.
As far as your workload goes, what is your response time for complaints? And are all the complaints handled equally? In other words, do you segregate high grass? I know it's a separate category, but are all of them handled in the order they're called in, basically, is what I'm asking.
No, we try to get to everything as quick as possible. Now, it is, some days, it can be a day where I come in and we've had an active day and I might have 20 new initials, or sometimes more. Sometimes during the summer, if the grass is really tall, we can have a lot more than that. So we get to them and work them as fast as we possibly can.
Like in 2 days, 3 days, what's your average?
We strive for 72 hours on everything, but again, that can depend on a few different items going on, if we can get to that. But we do try to get to everything as quick as possible.
Is there something that requires you to go, is there a type of report or infraction, if you will, that would cause you to say, I gotta hit that person?
Absolutely. If it's a life safety issue, that would be something that we would respond to. You had stagnant water in your backyard, you had a black pool, something that, or if you had a neighbor that had raw sewage leaking, or if you had a neighbor that their pool fence is down, those are life safety. So that will take priority over any other call that we have.
Okay, I think that was part of what Terry's question was also.
So I don't think this is enforced, but I did read it in the city code that you're supposed to, or you're required to have your house number on your house and a certain size of letters. So I had a new mailbox installed today, and I went straight to Walmart to get big numbers to put on my mailbox, and it's on my curbs to the driveway, but it's not on the house. And I've lived there 20 years, and nobody's ever said anything. So I think that's just a minor thing that you don't have time to probably pay attention to.
Well, I can tell you, at least for me, when I go to your house, and I know we're supposed to do this anyways, but for me, when I go to your house, if I go to a house, I'm addressing everything that is wrong at the time that I'm there.
okay.
So if you're missing your address, I'm not getting you just for unclean premise or something else.
So
I'm
you
going
write
to
a
get you for
ticket, a
everything.
citation? Is
Well,
that-
I'll give you a notice of violation.
Oh.
You know, all circumstances depend on exactly what's going on in the history on the house, because everything can change a little differently. But, you know, it's best to go ahead and address everything at that time, and let's try to get everything fixed at the same time.
Even if it's on the mailbox at the curb, but not on the house? Correct.
The ordinance states it needs to be on the structure. We, by policy, will allow the mailbox, the curb, as long as that emergency vehicle, you can see it
Yeah.
clearly, it's in
And
contrasting
you know what
colors.
house it
Yes,
is.
we do allow it.
Okay, Kelly, you're also in charge of Code Rangers.
Code
You want a brief comment on that?
Okay. Code Rangers is a program that you go through a class. It's about a 3 to 4 hour class. You learn about the top 10 code violations and reporting them, working in a neighborhood, working with your code officer. So let's say when you enter a complaint, you mark that you're a code ranger. That call comes to Robert. We try to run those within 72 hours. The code ranger does get an update on what actions the inspector took. What if it's issued a notice of violation, issued a citation, or no violation found at all. So the code ranger does get that response back. If you're not a code ranger, you're not going to get a response back to code unless you specifically tell that call taker, my name's Kelly, my number is this, and I want a call back from that inspector with an update. You know, then on the hundreds of calls we get, we do not, we don't, a lot of times it's anonymous. We don't know who's calling in. 90% of our calls come in anonymous that way. So you do get the update, you get follow-ups every time my inspector goes out there and does a follow-up. What if it's
I'm a
closed?
code ranger, and I'm probably one of the original ones.
Yes, it's a very good program.
It is.
We welcome anybody that would like to help code enforcement. You're our eyes and our ears, and,
When's your next class?
it's not set yet. I just had one in June, the end of June. I usually like about 15 or 20 people to be in a class. Right now I have 5 people interested, so if anybody's interested, I can leave my card, or if you know of anybody. I'm trying to get a class up together when I have enough people.
Tom, you have a question?
There's nothing on the app, but up and down Perkins Road, there are a lot of cable companies that have just laid out their cable on the ground and thrown it over the wood fence, and they've not buried it. But there's nothing on the app that gives me the opportunity
Yeah.
to to report that, how do we do it? I don't, I can call the company, but I don't know which company it is.
We
or
have a
whether they're
contact,
even
don't we?
still good.
We can contact, I used to have one, she's since then left, but I know one of my inspectors has a contact that we let them know that they need to come in and bury the cable. Usually they get to it pretty quick too.
Okay, because there's some along Perkins Road behind Tiffany Park.
Okay.
That have been there for 2 or 3 years. I've been walking
Oh,
out there.
They forgot about those.
Orange,
didn't
it
they?
says some oranges running along the ground, and then
Right.
there's a couple of white
Okay. So
cables
Perkins
down.
behind Tiffany Park area.
Yes,
Okay.
it would be